Hello, Math 10C. We are carrying on with um, factoring common factors part 2, but in this case we're going to be dealing with a special case, a binomial common factor um, in a question. Now the reason for this is that there is going to be something called tough trinomials where a is not 1, that you're going to need this process in order to factor that. So that's going to happen, I believe, in lesson 5. Now I just want to start this example with something that looks familiar to you. So for example, you might have had 4xa plus, let's say, 3ya. And when you look at that from the last lesson, you'd say, well, that's really easy, Mr. K. I have a common factor. What's in common with those two terms is a. And you take out the a, and what you have left over is a 4x plus a 3y. We talked about taking out the common factor and looking at the leftovers. But what if you had something maybe a little bit weirder than that? What if you had, okay, a new question, what if you had 4x and a happy face plus 3y and a happy face? We'll make him a happy head. Well, if you had a happy face, you'd say, well, what's in common is that happy face, and you could take that, oopsie, we'll make him blue. You could take that happy face out, and you'd be left with, same thing, 4x plus 3y. So when we take out the happy face or the a, we have, I guess you'd say, a monomial. We have just a simple little term that's a common factor. But you could also have a situation like this, a third question, and that's what this section is talking about. What if you had the same terms, except you'd have 4x and let's say you had, I don't know, p plus q. And then you have plus 3y p plus q. When you look at that, you'd say to yourself, these two things are exactly the same. I could take this factor, kind of like the happy face, I could take that out and put it by itself, p plus q in brackets, and the leftovers would now be 4x plus 3y. So the point of this is what we call a binomial common factor. So the common factor is not a happy face or an a, it's actually a binomial. And now you can see that occur in this. What's the common factor? X plus 7. I take the x plus 7 out, and I'm left with 4x minus 3. So we're using that principle. What do we have in common here? 3 minus 2y, 3 minus 2y. I take that out, and I have 3 minus 2y, and what's left over is 7 plus 2y. Okay, and lastly, I've got the common factor of 4a plus 1. I take the 4a plus 1 out. You need to be careful here. When you take the 4a plus 1 out, you have 9a plus 1. Remember, when you divide this out, so I'm going to do that in red, when you divide 4a plus 1 out into both, and 4a plus 1, remember when you divide this out, you're left with 1. So your leftovers need to be 9a plus 1, okay? And now you might want to try this one on your own, okay? Factor the following. Once again, we continue with that same strategy. And we can see, sometimes they're in a different order, but 3y plus 2 is the common factor. So I have 3y plus 2 times the leftovers are, in this case, I take that out, and I'm left with 5y plus 1 plus 4y. Remember, you always put things in simplest form. So inside those factors, right, this is still going to be 3y plus 2. I'm getting kind of squished in here. But this one, as you can see, we can simplify that. And we're going to get 5y plus 4y is 9y plus 1. Okay, so that would be simplest form. In the second one, we look and we say, ooh, I can see the a plus 6. There's my common, a minus 6. So I take my a minus 6 out, minus 6, a minus 6, times bracket 3a minus 9. And we look and say, now the only thing is, if you look in the back of the book, you'll notice that that's not the final answer. In the final answer, they do something, and if you look at this factor here, there is a common factor of 3 in those two terms. So if we go equals, I'll make that black, equals, the a minus 6 stays the same. A minus 6 stays the same, but that second factor, the blue one, I can take a 3 out and I'd be left with 3 times a minus, I'm having troubles with my minuses, a minus 3, okay? And almost done, the building block. Now here's a really, really big deal. Here, tuk, 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 we need to really be careful with this. Those two things are not the same. In order to make them the same, they're not a common factor, but they're close. They're completely opposite. So, a little aside over here, notice that if I have minus 5, I can write that. I can divide by minus 1 and write that as minus 1 times a positive 5. So if I have something like 5 minus x, I could rewrite that and say that's the same thing as having minus 1 times a minus 5 plus x. Or when you change those two signs, right, all I did was make the 5 negative and the x is positive, and that's equal to minus 1 times, just putting it in the proper order, right? So those two things are equivalent. And the reason you want to do that is if I need to make these two things the same, I need to rewrite it. So the best way for me to do that is to say, okay, well this is 2x, x minus 5, that's good. If I was to pull a negative out, so plus 5, if I was to pull a negative out of that bracket, so I'll put a negative right there, then the factor now, instead of being 5 minus x, would be x minus 5. They both change. And now you've got your common factor, and you get x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. So if you have something that's opposite, you need to change it so that it's the same. In the next example, same thing. I'm just going to do it up here now. If I have this, which is opposite, they look the same, but they're completely opposite. I'll pull a negative out. I don't want to rewrite the whole thing. So I have pull a negative out. That would make this a minus 3. And, can't see that very good, that would make this a minus 3 and this a positive x. So now, if you look, a negative and a negative cancel out, so that's positive 4, and my common factor is now x minus 3, whoops, I want that green, consistent, x minus 3, and my leftovers are a 20x and a plus 4, right? And the back of the book, once again, is going to do a little work. They're going to say, oh, wait, there's a common factor inside of there. And so the final answer is going to have an x minus 3. And just like when we're factoring numbers, I can pull a 4 out of there, and I have 4 times 5x plus 1. But I'm done. And that is the end of factoring binomial common factors. Well, when are we going to use this? Well, we're going to use this to group. And grouping is what we do when we're trying to do those trinomials. So in lesson 5, we're going to need this grouping skill, okay? And that's going to be where this happens. So when you look at a question like this, you say, I can't do anything with that. What do I do? What do I do? Well, we can't factor something out of all of them. There's no common factor. So what you do is you group it. So you go like this, and you go tick, 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 ding, 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 and you split them into two questions. So in the first question, I can see that I can factor out an x times x plus 3. And in the second question, I got a plus 6. I can factor out a positive 6, and I'm left with x plus 3. Now notice that positive sign there. Notice? Nice. I can see the common factor. So my common factor is x plus 3, and my leftovers are x plus 6. This is called grouping 4 things into 2 and 2, okay? Pairs. So again, this grouping question, tick, 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 draw a little line there. I got a positive 12x, so what can I do? I could factor out a 2x out of the first two, and I'm left with x minus 1. I can factor out a 3 out of the second two, plus 3, and I'm left with 4x minus 1. You can see I made a mistake. I don't have anything that matches up, and that's because when I look back to the beginning here, I made a little numerical mistake. I took a 2x out, and I'm left with 4x minus 1. Now I've got my common factor, and so I get 4x minus 1 times bracket, 2x plus 3. Just the binomial common factor. We go to the next pair, and this is where you need to decide. So we go like this, tick, 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 tick. So I can take out a 4a out of the first two, 4a times 2a minus 1. 4a times 2a minus 1, and I can take out a minus 5 out of the second two. Now, if you don't take a minus 5 out, remember you have to make sure you get the common factor. So this will be minus 5. I'd have a positive 2a and a minus 1 there, and that's a good thing because now you've got the same term, right? So I take my common factor of 2a minus 1 out, and I'm left with 4a minus 5. And all was good in the land, right? And we carry on in D, right? Again, tick, 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 tick. We split it and we factor. Okay, so now I've got, what can I take out? I can take out a 3a. Always take the greatest common factor, and I'm left with 2a minus 3. What can I take out of these two? Really nothing, but you need to take out a minus 1 so that you're left with positive 2a minus 3. You know you did something wrong if you don't get a common factor, or it doesn't factor, right? So now I've got 2a minus 3 times the leftovers are 3a minus 1. Getting close to the end, tick, 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 tick. Split it again. What do I take out? I can take a p out, and I'm left with q plus r. What do I take out of here? A minus s. Why did I do that? Because I want to get the same factor, q plus r. Do I have a common factor? Yes. So my common factor is q plus r, and the leftovers are p minus s. And lastly, we look at f and you go, whoa, what am I going to do with that? I look at it and go, whoa, there's nothing. I can't see anything. I go to split it and I can't do anything. There's no common factor between 5 and 18, x squared, y squared. There is a common factor here, but if you tried to group it, it doesn't work that way. This, you got to go back to Sesame Street, and you got to go, these two things don't belong together. These two things have something the same, no, something like that. So you need to rearrange it. So superstar, you need some special skills. Rearrange, and if you rearrange these into 5x squared, maybe we'll go 5x squared. There's different ways, but if we put 5x squared with the minus 15xy squared, and then we could have plus 18y squared minus 6x. So we put those two together. Now we factor out what we can. I'll pull a 5x out of the first two, and I'm left with x minus, oh, I'll pick up 5, yeah. Will that work? We pause and we look. If I take a 5x out, I'm left with x minus 3y squared, okay? Right, plus, what can I take out of the next one? I'm going to take out a minus 6, and if I do that, I have a 3y minus 3y squared, and a plus, take a minus 6 out, plus x. Oh, looks a little weird, but we have the same factor. This was a tricky one. And so I have the same factor, and I take out that common factor, and I get x minus 3y squared, bracket, what's left over? 5x minus 6. Okay? And that is it. Please come tomorrow, and if you have any questions about that lesson, it's a deeper, tricky one, especially F, and we'll talk about your assignment. Well done.